Um, how do you logically, right, if it starts going up and you hit 30, 40, 50%, how do you what's some of the thought process as you
For
go,
taking
do
profits?
I yeah, take a profits? Do I let it ride? Do I take profits? Right?
Yeah. So now you have two like tools, I think, in your arsenal. You have this, right? So you may, for Python, I mean, any given day, you may have to like try to ignore this, which is hard because there might be some extreme price action, but you want to like really like live. If you're a macro person, you want to
Hmm.
like live, here, and kind of like watch those things. And as they become bullish, hey, one day through the week, like those are the places you want to live. But it's true that even reversals will kind of inevitably start here in the 24-minute through the 4 hour. And so that's a good place to decide, like, I want to move my stop up because this is getting dicey, or hey, I'm invested, I'm cool, like price action's already here. My entry is like, my stop loss is here, my entry was here. I'm just going to let it ride because I still believe in my thesis and I knew it was going to be crazy on the way up. And I still like my original plan of risking $1,500 to make 15,000, right? Because the whole goal was to take 10,000 and I either lose 1,500 or I get the 150% gain. And so I end up with 25,000. So 15,000 is actually my profit. Um, and so do I want to play the game where I assess every so often, or do I want to play the game where I'm just in it and this is just one really long-term trade that's going to last me all the way to December, and I'm right or wrong and it doesn't even matter, right? Like when you've made peace emotionally and financially with I'm going to lose this or I'm going to make this, then you don't have to do anything other than, check in every probably 15 days or 30 days. I mean, that's the hard part, right? We want to check in daily, but that's one way to look at it. And then the other thing that I think maybe will help answer your question, if you're really curious, is a lot of people will use like these trend-based FIB extensions. And so we can go more into this, but it's kind of like, let me see, am I doing that right? No, I don't think I am. Almost. I almost had it. Okay, I think it's here, and then here, and then here. And then let's draw it out because we expect this to be like a December thing. And so now if I'm doing it the way that I believe other traders will do it, which is the whole goal, right? If enough people think a certain thing, it becomes true. And so this would be take profit zone 1, 21%. This would be take profit zone 2 or potential resistance, 50%. This would be a third resistance, 74%. And so if you kind of do this same exercise with Bitcoin, it's historically gone, in a major cycle to the 1.618, I believe. And so that would actually probably be my goal for Pyth. Just if I was just purely looking at this, I have no idea what Pyth is. It could flop and die for all I know. But if Pyth is anything, and if Pyth has like a normal growth trajectory, then I would say like probably, taking profits in these ranges. This is a good one because it's an all-time high. So this is probably like one that you can count on will have, some degree of volatility. This is another good one. And then I think like a goal for like I don't know if we'll call it like a midterm high for Python, a lot of times it's right around this zone here. So this happens to be 265. So a 2x leverage trade on this is pretty crazy, and
Mhm.
and now what's funny is when you zoom out and you get a little perspective and you go like, how volatile is Python really? Like, it's not really that crazy. There was this, I mean, in Bitcoin is not much different, right? There was this moment of time where there was extreme volatility and a massive wick on a 1 day time frame. And then there was this day, which had a massive like liquidation wick on a 1 day time frame. And then there was this one here that was, pretty significant, this one pretty significant. But if you think about it, and then you like not even just think about it, but kind of do the math on it, and you go, this is an asset that is currently 200 days old. So like we were talking about, right? It's the first day that
Right.
the 200-day moving average showed up. Um, this has only had like liquidation level, like extreme liquidation level volatility once, twice, three. I don't know. We'll call this the same one, right? Four. Four times in its history has it had like a ridiculous, just like take all my money if I'm in any kind of leveraged position type of trade. And maybe not. I mean, these actually wouldn't probably have liquidated people at 2x leverage, but they would have liquidated probably anybody at 10x leverage for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And they probably would have even liquidated 5x leverage, pretty certain of that too. So kind of like another case study for, hey, if I was going to do derivatives on Pyth for a long-term period, maybe I should just stick to like, 1.5 or 2x leverage. Because even 1.5 allows you to make 50% more money on your funds through that derivative. And that's kind of amazing. It's like saying, I can participate in the, in the upward potential of Pyth at a rate that I make an extra 50% on my money minus fees. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what 1.5x leverage is. um, so what I would do is probably just kind of like decide on if I was going to do something like that. Just the whole goal with all of this is just to think through things based on logic. And so I would probably look for reasons to feel that I'm safe from liquidation. So it'd probably be there, right? Like, why would it be there? Because this is one, but maybe it's not good enough. This is one, but it's above us. And so really like if I go here, technically that's the
Hmm.
lowest Pyth has been since, here. So I might choose a leverage or a stop loss or a whatever of Pyth that allows this. And so I might have this majorly long-term logic that says, this is my plan, probably somewhere in the middle of that range is my goal, and my stop loss is like right here. And I'm willing to lose, whatever. And if you are willing to lose 30%, then where you go with that is what absolute value am I willing to lose 30% of? Maybe it's only $1,000, you know. I'm willing to lose 30% of $1,000. Well, now $300 doesn't sound that bad. You're like, I could do that to maybe participate in Pyth. And who knows? The crazy thing about these crazy crypto assets is if Pyth is $10 one day, you're like, holy cow! I'm glad I put 1 grand into Pyth when it was 44 cents, because
Right.
now I own $20,000 from that one crazy thing I did. And I was willing to lose $300. And amazingly enough, I don't even know what Pyth is, but now it's worth 20,000. And I think that's what, a lot of people do. And if you research the fundamentals, if you're really going to invest in something for the long term, you could do that too. But I'm sure I would recommend that even. But if you don't like this asymmetry, knowing this is the absolute safest, support, then you kind of have to just find reasons that maybe a different one would still be useful. And so I would just try to find logic. And there is no logic, unfortunately, on the 3-day or the 1 week, because they're all red clouds and they're all resistances. But the whole goal would be to try to find some additional logic that's like the reason that you could use, a different data point as a support. So if you didn't like this asymmetry and you wanted to put a little more into it, you could maybe do something like this. And you could also toy with the settings on the volatility monitor. Knowing that I always kind of tend to keep it on dynamic, you could make it more sensitive, right? And you could say, okay, that gives me a little logic for being a little bit less, right? Instead of losing 30%, if I could land this trade, I would only lose 16%. Let me put 2,000 in, or 2,500, because I like that logic a little bit. So you could do that, or you could say, I want to see how the volatility monitor is respected in the trend seeking multi-day, multi-week time frame. this is me using it for what it's for. And as long as I see a history of respect, then maybe I'll use this. And so you could literally kind of just follow this, knowing that at some point it's likely to touch it. You could just literally follow it up, right? It's like getting it here and then just being like, whenever it touches my volatility cloud is when I'm buying. And then like somewhere in here, you know, you would have probably picked it up. And so like with a lot of assets, you know, or even if you use the 4 hour to do that for entry purposes. But I say that about the volatility monitor because it gives you a batch of extra logic to utilize for entry purposes or maybe for stop loss purposes or whatever. And again, if we're not blind to pretending like we don't have access to the history, then we get to see just how good is it when I'm talking about Pyth, right? Like historically, it's like, wow, this was pretty good for quite a while. This was pretty good for quite a while. This one, you know, lasted for quite a while, and then it got breached here. Gosh, this one, it was totally ignored, but heck, it was right. It was a wick. It actually closed above. So if I owned the asset, that would have just been a rough day. But if I owned a derivatives position, I owned a 2x or a 5x position, I would have lost all my money. So let me take that into consideration. But man, I gotta say, those days are relatively rare. You know, like overall, these things are pretty good. Here it is down here. Never has even breached it on a wick. Looks like it did breach it on a wick like right around this time frame. But it's rare, you know, and so like you get to look at the statistics and go 91 out of 100 days, it's good to go. So how do I protect myself, you know, or how do I
Mhm.
choose to use that data? But Python is so volatile, and obviously it was newer back then too, that it's going to be one of those assets that probably on occasion just completely disrespects the volatility line. And you know, and that's what you have to be careful of, and that's why you wouldn't put all your whole retirement money into Python. You
And
would,
curious,
what's that?
you know, I was going to say curious along the lines of the investing, right? Because we're talking long term.
Right.
So, in in the way that you typically invest and how you do it, do you have a mix that you have some set up long like this that it would be several months and you have something in Bitcoin and just picking that, or even Python here, you might go, hey, I might actually put something in to that to do that long, or would you just say, I like some of my assets or my cash to be a little bit more liquid, and I don't want to tie it up in what I think to be a 6-month trade.
Yeah, so I do. I mean, I think everybody has to do it differently, but I have started to use the portfolio monitors. Um, let me pull that one up. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't like messed with it, they're in that class that he's building, that the DIIO 24. But just for instance, so